Hello, everybody. My name is Kashawn Hopkins. I'm an instructional technology specialist from Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. And today I'm going to talk about the technology integration matrix for this particular tech talk. So should be some really great stuff in here. I'm also joined here with my colleague. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Kurt Bernhardt. I'm the Director of Technology for OPSRC. And Kashawn and I make up the tech team here. And need any tech help, just reach out to us.
And you can do so through this lovely, really easy email here, techteam@opsrc.net. You'll get me and Kurt through that, and just whatever you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be tech talks. We would love to have a conversation with you. Additionally, I have a link to the slides over here, which I will copy and also read out because it is case sensitive. So the link for this would be lowercase t period ly / uppercase v lowercase c, uppercase d, and lowercase a. So I highly recommend, I always recommend that you take a look at my slides on them, usually so you can follow along, but on at least this little small series that I've been doing over technology integration frameworks, I especially recommend that you take a look at them. There's just so many links, so many resources that are attached to every single one of them. So yeah, just take a look. And if you're listening to the recording, it should all be attached there. So it shouldn't take you all that long to get there. Okay, so this particular one that I'm going to be focusing on is probably the most robust of all of the technology integration frameworks. It's called the Technology Integration Matrix. On here, it's developed by the Florida Center of Instructional Technology. Looks a little something like this. I'll try to give the full view here. But here's the basic shape of the matrix. Oh, I guess this one would probably be a little better. This is the basic shape of the matrix. The idea is that it takes these 5 levels of technology integration, which we'll break down a little bit further down over here, going from left to right, starting with the least complex, going to the highest level of complexity. And it compares them, it intersects them with these different characteristics of learning environments here. Just to get a tad bit more concrete, the different levels of technology integration are at the very top. They're the columns. So from left to right, they start from the entry level, going up to adoption, then adaptation, infusion, and transformation. So we'll go more in detail about what each one of those means, but just know from left to right, it gets more complex, more higher order, more rigorous. So it's something that you can work through. So there is an order to this for sure, hierarchy. And then the rows over here are different activities, different common things from classroom to classroom that will help you create a successful classroom environment so you can help hit those student outcomes. So different dimensions that you can look at would be like what levels of students are engaged, the active level, the collaborative level, the constructive level, and authentic level, and I mustn't forget the goal-oriented level. So we'll go more in detail on this one. I know this one definitely looks like it's really complex on here, but if you just if you take the time, unpack the parts here, you get to really see that this, not just this matrix, but this entire website that was created by the Florida Center for Instructional Technology is a wonderful, just incredibly robust tool here. So I would love to unpack some of this stuff with you as a sort of introduction to what's out there. But before I do that, first, my schedule, as usual. I start with my introduction, which we just got through, and move into my objective, just making sure that I'm touching all my bases there. And then the way that I've been framing all of these tech talks that are about integration frameworks, I start very broad and just get more and more specific here. So my first thing that I want to talk about is, why would you bother to use a technology integration framework? Why don't you just put technology in your classroom and see what happens? So I'll try to give some arguments for that. Next, I move into this specific tech talk, which is, why would you use the, for short, the TIM model, so the technology integration matrix model? on that. Then from there, I try to break down the individual parts here. So I won't go entirely for every single square on that one. I would take a lot more longer. Speaking of the length on here, this is going to be a little longer than most of my tech talks. I usually keep them to about 30 minutes. Just try to focus in on that one. This one will be a little bit longer than the other one. So if you do have to go, totally fine. Make sure you get those slides. That way you'll be able to take a look at it, and there will be the recordings as well. So yeah, we'll get to that. Next, I'll be focusing on applications. On this one, I broke them down into phases here. So there's the pre-assessment phase. This is you learning, you or your school, your colleagues learning what the TIM model is. Then taking a look at the planning phases. How do you build out lesson plans? What kind of questions should you be asking? And then the evaluation step. What are some things that you can do post-lesson that you can take a look at and see kind of where you're at? And this works in a cyclical manner. So all of these applications kind of blend into each other. Then finally, I'll give some advice, share some goodies, some links with you, share a link to the evaluation for this tech talk, and answer any questions that you may have if you're still here. So tons of things to take care of. So let's just jump on in and start unpacking. First of which is my objective. After this training, teachers will be able to apply the 5 rows and columns of the TIM model to integrate technology into your classroom. And I almost want to rewrite this now, just because of like, it's not just about integration. This model I feel is so in depth. You can do so many other things with it, like evaluation. You can kind of assess where you're at. Man, I'm already starting to try to unpack this stuff on this, but let me save it for now. That's my objective. First of which, I'd like to give a little bit of an argument for technology frameworks just in general on here. Try to imagine that you're trying to develop, to design a kitchen. I tried to pick this because, you know, generally speaking, people have an idea of what's in a kitchen, what kinds of things you should be able to do in there, what things are in there. But I'm talking about the real nuts and bolts. Like, what are the things that you need inside of the kitchen? How do you get electricity going there? How do you get the water going in there? How do you work with the sewage or your waste on here? So you need to have these processes in place. How do you consider your kitchen successful? Like after you build it out, what are some ways to measure this level of success? How do you evaluate a good kitchen versus a poorly made kitchen? Or if you're thinking about the future, what if you have to replace some things? If something breaks, who do you call? What's kind of the protocol for that? And then finally, how do you compare yourself to other kitchens? Like if you want to compare your level of success to somebody else's level of success, or make upgrades across the board there, how do you do that? And I would argue, in fact, teachers are already pretty good at using frameworks for their pedagogy and frameworks like standards for their content, but these frameworks also can work for technology as well. And so that's kind of all of those things that I asked about the kitchen really do apply to technology as well. So I'm going to borrow a little bit of a quote from the U.S. Office of Educational Technology. I think they know a little bit more, a lot more than I do about integrating technology. So they said this in their technology plan of 2017. They said integrated technology should be used to transform learning experiences with the goal of providing greater equity and accessibility. It's all about reaching more students than we ever had before, reaching them kind of where they're at, and giving them these experiences and empowering them. And I think particularly the model that I'm going to go over in this one, like I feel like the other two that I've already touched on, the SAMR model, the TPAC model, in my previous weeks have mentioned kind of the roles a little bit. They mentioned it, but this particular framework really, like it's a core part of the fact that you're empowering students, like you're moving from kind of like a teacher-centered place to a student-centered place. Anyways, broadly speaking about the tech integration frameworks, they're research-based. This is a living, breathing thing that you can go out there, go to your favorite research engine out there, go to your conventions, and you can see that people are still trying to apply data to this to try to determine how effective these parts are in different parts of the world and in different languages. So fantastic stuff out there. Next of which, generally speaking, for the frameworks, I believe they help with creativity and autonomy, but they give them some sort of structure. In any one of these models that you look at, they never specify what type of tool you should be using. That is a decision that is ultimately made by the teacher, and its continued use is also kind of being made by the students as well on like how they react to it. So that you still maintain that level of decision and empowerment there, but it just gives you some guidelines, some things to look at, some measurable goals to reach forward. So fantastic stuff from frameworks. And of course, it supports digital literacy. There is no doubt that we're trying to prepare our students not just for the issues that came from the past, the problems they are dealing with now, but also problems that are not even defined yet. We're trying to help them. We're trying to empower them. So with all of these little digital literacy skills, so that they have the best opportunity to take these tools and try to develop solutions to problems. Okay, so that's my argument for tech integration frameworks. I'm going to move on and kind of assuming that, okay, yeah, you're interested for right now, but let me give you a little bit of hook for the TIM model here. So technology integration matrix here. So a couple of points that I do want to make, some really fascinating stuff, especially since they're this website's the one for the TIM model is probably the best one that I've seen for the like if you compare it to like the TPAC website, and there's not even a website for the SAMR model on that one, I had to find some articles and kind of sort of put some of the stuff together. But this is kind of like a living, breathing website where they update the stuff all the time. And it's done so because it's developed by a team. It's not like one guy or kind of a group of guys kind of publishing a paper there. It's developed by a whole team. And the center's whole thing is that they want to create this model, and they want to create it with a specific intention that teachers can use it. So they've written it in a very basic language. And that's as intimidating as this like 25 square matrix that you have over here. If you look at the language itself, it's all kind of worded in a very structural, specific way. So if teachers are taking a look at it, they're going to get some of this value here. You'll see some of this, the wording being reused in a couple of different places. And I'll point out some of that language stuff in a little bit later, once we do a bit of the breakdown for the model. Next of which is that this was also designed, all of the resources that all the resources that come out of the matrix are designed for the different parts of the classroom. It's not just for students and teachers. It's designed in a way that it's taking a look at the whole context around the classroom, which is one of the things that I really enjoy about this model. So it involves technology coaches. They have a coaching program with a coaching cycle, which I don't think I have it in this presentation, but I'll reference it if I see it in my resources. It brings in educational leaders in here. It talks about the researchers. It has the research section dedicated to that as well. So it's great stuff. It's great stuff, and just really robust and well developed. I did mention a second ago, but there are tons of free resources. Now, I do want to mention that there is like a subscription where there are some evaluation tools, but you don't necessarily have to have that to implement this in your classroom, or you could even implement this on a PLC level or a school-wide level, district level, if you want to. And there's just tons of little free resource that you can use. In fact, you'll even see some of those resources being used inside of this presentation. So I wanted to give people ideas on how to use this. So I also incorporated it into my presentation as well, so you can see a bit of that. And then finally, a little bit of a bonus on this one. I didn't want to talk too much about the other technology integration models, just because I've done separate tech talks on them already. But the fact that a way to look at the technology integration matrix is that it is sort of a subset of the TPAC model. So for anybody that's already knows what the TPAC is, or you listen to my tech talk already, it really unpacks the TPK level. So the connection between the relationship between the technology and the pedagogical side of knowledge. So looking at that relationship, it's just like a really crazy in-depth part of that specific section. So really cool connection between these. I'd say that between the models, like the connections that I've tried to make, these two frameworks probably have the closest connections between each other. Okay, doing all right on time. Good. Okay, so let's start breaking down the individual pieces of the matrices. And I'm going to do that in groups. I'm going to first focus on the technology integration matrices rows. So these are labeled as the 5 characteristics of meaningful learning environments. I'm not going to go as far. I'm going to just kind of summarize them in a way. I don't want to spend too much time on this one because these are things that you're probably already familiar with as an educator. So these are things that you're probably either trying in your classroom, or you've seen in other classrooms, or you know that these are just kind of like dimensions that you can work with. But there are resources out there, which I'll show a little bit later on, like if you do need kind of like you know what collaboration is, but you're not entirely sure how to go about it. There are some fantastic resources like that on the website here that I'll show in a bit. The thing that I will be spending a bit more time on are breaking down the columns. I'll do a little bit more deep dive on that one, since I feel like that is a little bit more specific to the technology integration matrix. Anyways, without further ado, that's this next section that we're going to go into. Let's start breaking down the rows. So first of all, you have the active row. So these are these colored rows here on the matrix. And for each one of these rows, you have starting from the left, kind of the entry level stuff, and then you're working your way to the right to the very end with the transformational stuff. Stages here of technology use. And so I'm just trying to isolate them in the way so we can observe them a little bit better. So in the active model, this is trying to describe what is the level of student engagement here. How are they interacting with whatever the lesson that you're trying to do through the lens of the technology that you're trying to use. So you can imagine at the lowest stage of this, so this would be the entry level, students are just kind of getting the information. They're watching a video, they're looking at a presentation, something short like that. At the highest level of this one, they're just like integrating the technology tools. They're using them all the time. They're using them in ways that are not standard. They're trying to figure out new innovative ways to use these tools here. All right. For the collaborative characteristic here, this is students working together, like at an individual level. Maybe it's like very base. Students are just trying to learn what these tools, that whatever technology tool that you're using, they're just trying to learn how to use it. They're just using it on an individual basis. But at the highest level here, they're not just working with students in their classroom. They're probably working with students outside, across the world. They're connecting with communities in there. They see kind of like the broader context on like how people are connecting to this content. It's not just content that's just for the classroom, which kind of dips a little bit into the authentic sense, but I'll save that for a minute, because next is constructive. The constructive characteristic is students connecting new information with old information here. So it's that old transfer problem of not just seeing the lessons that you were doing as individual pieces, but more a connective tissue, kind of like a story that you're trying to tell. That's a story that's as old as time, on like, how to like fractions connect to ratios, and like graphs connect to rates, and just how a subject isn't confined to years or anything like that. Or subjects, like all of this knowledge is just connected together, and just having students see these connections here. Next is the authentic characteristics here. And in this case, this is students connecting what they're doing in this kind of like isolated incident like this inside of the classroom. They're learning things sort of in a vacuum here, and them being able to make that connection to, oh, I am, I'm learning how to do percents and things inside of my classroom through these worksheets or however way that you're having them do it. But I could use this to calculate tip if I wanted to, whenever I'm at a restaurant. So seeing these contexts start to develop for the students, there's the authentic characteristic. And then finally, goal directed. And I feel like, in a way, well, I don't know, this could be just kind of personal conjecture on my part, but I feel like this tends to be overlooked here. But giving the students a way to create their own goals, and once they have those goals, use those goals as sort of signposts to monitor their progress, to see how they're doing on here. And then as they're making their way through, getting closer and closer to the goals, try to evaluate the results and making adjustments on there. And I think in terms of like motivational tools, I'm thinking about I'm thinking of self-determination theory, any of that, just being able to connect all of this and empower the students. I feel like this is really an impactful part. I'm not trying to give more than one weight to each one of these characteristics. I think they're all fantastic stuff, but I feel like lots of value in this goal directed section here. And I'm going to be quiet for a second, actually, for one of these. And I want you to look at all of these, and I want you to see what kind of pattern you might be able to see on all of these rows. What's something that's connecting all of them together? So let me be quiet for a moment. There is a word that I've actually used on each one of these little sections. It's all about the students. The students are the subject of each one of these characteristics. One of the things that you will see as we make from it, and this is something I want you to keep in mind as we're going through the columns in a second of the matrix, is the shift from, the teacher is the one who is providing the information. They're the gatekeeper. They're the wizard of information. Everything comes from them, and they give it out to the students. And having that role of the teacher sort of shift from like being the controller of the knowledge to giving that up towards the students, like giving them more control, giving them more responsibility, empowering them so that they are able to make their own decisions, that they can kind of evaluate the situation and pull out whatever tools that they think they might need on that one. And you'll see that as we make our way through the different levels of technology integration, how that, and you'll see it at a certain point that there is a shift, and then from there on out, from that turning point there, students start to take more and more control, and it's more about them, and the teacher starts to act more as a mentor, a model, a facilitator here. So having that shift happen there. And so it's not just important in the classroom context, but also very specifically with the technology as well. So let's talk columns on here. So here are the columns, just generally speaking, so we have an idea of the steps we're taking here, starting from left to right, least complex to the most complex, starting from teacher-centered to student-centered. We have the entry level, the adoption level, the adaptation level, infusion level, and then finally the transformation level. So let's take just a little bit of time to break down each section and try to pull out some characteristics here. That's what I would like to do. So from here on out, at least for this section, I wanted to use one of the resources that is available on the website. So actually, if you're like a technology coach, or you're just a teacher who's interested in this and you're like, man, this is really cool, I want to try to incorporate this, not just in my classroom, but like in more of like a school sense or a broader context here, there are tons of resources that are available to that you can pull and use for professional development on here. And they have all this stuff for free. So that is what I'm doing here. This is professional development, so I'm using it for this. And this is pulled. I modified them a little bit and made some of my own annotations so we can get pull a little bit more. I can focus a bit here. But yeah, let's start at the entry level, the first row on here, and how it intersects with each of those characteristics of successful learning environments here. So at the entry stage, this does mention, and this is all framed from the perspective of the teacher, but you could also frame it from the perspective of the students, which I'll break down a little bit in a minute in the full description down there. But first of which, and let me make this a little bit bigger here. We have the teacher begins, I'm reading from the box here, the teacher begins to use technology tools to deliver curriculum content to students. So thinking, connecting to TPAC a little bit. If you don't know what it is, that's totally fine. But just kind of connecting that, this is where technology hits the content here. You're introducing, you're really just focusing on, getting your students acquainted here. You're introducing a weird, unknown entity to the students, so they got to interact with it. And this is kind of like, I love this stage here because it's like where you get to pique that curiosity. This is like the, oh, wow, look what we can do. Look at this like a new thing that we can interact with here. What this looks like for the students, and I've underlined a few of this from the sections down here. You don't have to read that whole thing. I didn't want to include the whole thing just so you could use this as a little bit of a reference. But the presentation, and I've marked it on each one of these because none of these resources are mine. This is all made by the Florida Center of Instructional Technology. Just putting that out there. I wanted to try to be really good about my sources. All of that should be at the bottom of the pages anyway. But for students, this looks like listening to or watching content. It looks like drill and practice exercises. So these are just kind of the lowest level. This is like you're getting the very minimum out of here. And the whole intention is to have students get acquainted. This is the introduction phase. And ultimately, I've underlined this last bit here, decisions are made by the teacher. Nothing wrong with starting out over here because, it's not just about the student's comfort level, it's about yours as well. And, if you're looking uncomfortable a little bit there, the students will be like, oh, I don't know about the situation. But, it's all about teaching yourself to be a good model with every single one of these tools that you want to introduce into your classroom. Okay, so entry stage, that's what it's about. Next, the adoption, the second level that we have over here, just reading this box, the teacher directs students in conventional procedural use of the technology tools. I think the key piece of that, and especially down over here, I've marked it, it's the last thing that I've underlined, is procedural understanding. How do you, now that you are introduced with the technology tool, how do you get this tool to spit out a predicted outcome on there? Like, for example, Google Docs or Microsoft Word. How do I get this tool? How do I use this tool in a way to take notes or present notes, like present information or share information, something like that. So both of those options have like share options. You can not only create it for yourself individually, but you can also use that piece of technology to share it with other people as well. So the information is just not limited to you. At this phase, you're kind of limited to single types of tasks. You're just really focusing on like, what are some really key things that I can do here? It's really like taking a screwdriver and knowing, okay, yeah, I could use this to undo screws and fasten screws, but you're not really doing anything fancy here. But it's all about just kind of like deepening that understanding of how to use that tool in a very specific way. Okay. So this is, I feel like this is where the fun, I mean, it's all fun to me, honestly, I think. But this is where that shift that I was talking about, all of these two other stages here, entry and adoption, are really teacher focused. Your teacher's making the decision, the teacher's deciding, okay, these are the specific things, the tasks that we're going to learn here. And it is fine to spend plenty of time at these stages, really just kind of developing a strong foundation for your student, a strong comfort level. You can start to see some of those student leaders just excel on there. And you can also use this time to help out with those students that really need that support there. But here's where the shift happens here. So reading that box, the teacher facilitates students in exploring and independently using technology tools. So it is worth your time to really take your time at this section that you have here. So from here, the first thing that I've underlined is emphasized is the technology tools are an integral part of the lesson. If you take the tools out of the lesson, it's a completely different lesson here. So you got to really know your stuff when it comes to the technology tool and its place inside of your lessons here. It's not just merely a simple enhancement of what you're doing. It is part of the lesson. You can take it out. For the students, down over here, the second thing I've underlined is that they are doing an independent use of the technology tools. They don't need your help as much because they've gotten all that practice in the entry and the adoption stage there. They're like, oh, yeah, great. A teacher is presenting a lesson. I'm just going to go ahead and boot up my my Google Docs or Google Slides, and then I'm going to start making sense of this myself. Boom, adaptation there. And the very last thing is that they're able to produce work without any kind of instruction on here. So it's all that independent stuff. That I think the key part of this adaptation phase is the independence of your students. But something I do want to mention, you got to have that comfort level with the students. You got to give them practice. You got to give them time to have some fun on the tools, and then focus that fun towards specific practical applications. Next, we're getting up there in the level of complexity. In there is the infusion stage. So at this stage, it says the teacher provides a learning context and the students choose technology tools. So for students to be able to choose their technology tools, you got to teach them a range of different technology tools. So this is like you've gone through entry, adoption, adaptation for multiple tools here. So I'm working all of them into this nice little technology casserole that we got going on here. And once you have these different options for your students, you present kind of like an open-ended problem. You say, okay, cool. I want you to take everything that you've learned in this unit, and I want you to present something to me, present information in front of the class or in some kind of way that students who are not in the class or have kind of like basic information could learn those tools, could learn whatever this content is. And you just say, go for it. You do give them, you probably should, classroom manager wise, probably should add in a bit more structure in there, but that's just an idea that I had. So students have the option. They could put together a video presentation, upload it online, put it on YouTube, and then students can use that. Students could maybe develop a website and they could do it in kind of like a portfolio fashion. Students could prepare a speech and use like PowerPoint or slides and present in front of the class, just whatever their comfort level is. But they have these decisions to make in terms of what is the mode of delivery and what do I include in the content that I'm trying to present on here. So so this does require a bit of open-endedness and just asking, challenging the students to look back at what they have and try to solve that problem. So yeah, to moving forward, second thing I've underlined, students are making informed decisions. They already have an idea. They've had plenty of practice with these tools. They've worked independently. Now it's time for them to take that. They're taking that step from just knowing how to use a thing to actually applying it in that stage. So fantastic stuff. But one thing that I want to point out at the very end here is that teachers are guiding students. They're not making the decisions anymore at this stage. They are simply there. So if a student's like, okay, I don't know if I want to make a video, I don't know if I want to make a web page, I don't know if I want to make a presentation, you know, they go to the teacher and like, how do I narrow this down? Because I know we've used all of these tools. And so you can say, well, you know, I know you really struggle with public speaking. So maybe not the video or the presentation. So maybe if you do the website, you could work in a small group with these other students here who I've talked to already. And they wanted to do a website. So maybe you could work with them and they could figure something out from there. The teacher is working as a mentor, and a part of that is just really knowing your students there. And then finally, we have the transformation step, just a block of text here, but let me just pull out the little pieces in the box. Teacher encourages innovative use of technology tools to facilitate higher order learning activities that may not be possible without the use of the technology. Once again, technology is so integrated in here. If you take it out, you've removed the core of what the lesson is supposed to be or how the content is going to be presented here. So for students on their perspective, they are combining conceptual understanding with extensive practical knowledge. So they're putting all the pieces together here, and they're using their technology, I've marked it here, in unconventional ways and in self-directed manners. They're using various tools. So this is kind of like a fully realized, like, ideal use of technology. Like, they're coming up with solutions, innovative solutions to problems that are not well defined here. And they're just coming up with this stuff, and it comes directly from them. And the teacher is serving as a guide, mentor, or a model at each parts of these stages. So it's really hard to imagine what this stage looks like, because it's just so ill-defined from the problem to the solution on here. But, you know, and something I don't think I've mentioned before, but on this matrix, I think they do a pretty good job of breaking this down and giving more examples if you do need something to kind of hang your hat on. It feels a little bit abstract and really dense at this stage, but something that you can do on this matrix, on this table here, is if you ever need a breakdown in any one of these sections, let's say, for example, you really need a breakdown of the transformation stuff beyond what I've given, and I want to do it for the active stage here. So I'm going to go over to transformation, active, and the box that they intersect with, I'm going to click on. And not only that, they have what this looks like as a descriptor for students, they have it for teachers, and on top of that, what the setting is going to look like. And below that, we have video lessons that you could potentially do. So some transformative level stuff would be like doing a poetry podcast or inventing a virtual vacation travel guide. So there's some really cool stuff and extended descriptors, related resources to this specific part of the matrix. And you can do that with any part of the matrix, and they're all structured the same way, so it's easy to find. So if I click on just a random part of the matrix, I should get the thing that I'm looking at here, what level it's at, this extended descriptors for students, teachers, in the setting, video examples, and related resources. Each one of those sections have that. So really cool stuff that is worth your time taking a look through. But I think that is a nice little close for that section. Okay, taking a look at the time. I know I won't be able to go too far in depth, but this sort of ties into my resources as well, like my goodie slides that I'm going to do a little bit later. So let me talk about some practical applications. Like, what do I go with next now that I kind of know this information, or at least have a base level understanding of it? I think there's lots of ways that you can approach the TIM model on here. Just to start out with, one example is the sorting activity. They have it in cards and as a like an interactive game that I'll show in a second. You could even print out giant posters and do this like in front of a crowd as far as like a professional development opportunity. And I have links to that stuff down over here. But yeah, if let's say, for example, you want to figure out kind of where you are at, either in your classroom or in a lesson or as a school. And to do that, you have to really figure out, like, how are these ordered in a way, and then determine what part of the row you're at or what type of the column that you're at. And so you could do it with these kind of like perforated sections here, or I think I have the printed version. So you can print all this stuff out too as well. They have PDF versions of all of this stuff. But yeah, there it is. But the basic idea is they've taken every single characteristic and you can take a look at them and you could sort them by what stage you think they're at. So like, for example, the language here is information passively received. Let's see if I can do this, fingers crossed. So I'm going to put that in the entry level here. And I'm just taking a look at the language here. And so like the transformative stage would be an unconventional use. That's something that I'm keying into. At the adoption stage, I know that is something about procedural use of tools here. So those specific tools. That's the adaptation. I want to say that's the independent use. I'm keying into that independent. So it's having that switch happen from teacher-centered to student-centered. And then from here, Infusion's probably something more of like a self-directed thing. So I'm going to check that. Yay, 5 out of 5. Awesome. Good stuff on here, but great activities on there that are available. And yeah, lots of ways to do it. Another type of activity that you can do is at the planning stages. Like if you're developing a lesson plan, what are some things that you can kind of get out of the technology integration matrix? So one of them, is the matrix itself. Just after you've pre-assessed and you kind of figured out where you're at, you start to set these goals. What's a way that I could go from one stage to the next? And kind of a cyclical model that you can use to make sure that you have all of these pieces. And this is very similar to the TPAC in a way, like making sure that you have these different components in here is asking yourself these questions. What is a new concept for my students? What standards apply? What curriculum applies? So the content. And then what do my students need on here? What will help them learn? How do I individualize instruction? And then you take a look at, okay, what technologies are available to me? How do these technologies relate to what we've already used? What are some limitations to keep in mind? And all of this connects together. So they have this planning model on here. I think it's good stuff. You can print it out if you want to. They got PDFs. It's great. But you can use this to plan things out and sort of fill out your model and combine that with what you know about your classroom and set those goals. You'll say like, okay, I feel like where I'm at is at the adoption for the active here. I'm just using these tools in a procedural way. How do I take that up a notch and give students the opportunity to make choices in their classroom? So seeing those relationships from section to section. Okay, and then finally, evaluating yourself. There's actually more descriptions on here. Like whenever I clicked on one of these sections, I got an individual description for students, teachers, and settings. They actually have a PDF, and this is also included in the resources, of a summary of the descriptors, which is what I was talking about before on this matrix, and you can print it out if you'd like. But also they have a table of the teacher descriptions. What should it look like for the teacher for each one of those 25 sections in the matrix? They also have the same thing, but for students, and the same thing for the context as well. Like what should the setting look like? So these look an awful lot like rubrics, just kind of pointing that out. So you can use any one of these to determine, okay, now that I have done my lesson, where do I think I am at in my classroom? You can really do kind of a litmus test there and really figure it out. So yeah, I put that there. And I also put the shift, the model of like how you shift from teacher-centered stuff to student-centered stuff on here. So this is called the underlining dimension scale. I think it's worth looking at, but I don't think I have time to fully break it down in here, but it is worth looking at on there, just seeing kind of the differences from one side of the matrix to the other side of the matrix. But one thing I do want to point out is the section down over here on the bottom right-hand corner. As the level of technology integration increases, the emphasis on these underlying dimensions increases as well. So take a look at those when you got the time, take a look at it. Okay, I have just a tiny little bit of time left. So I want to end things out by grounding you a little bit here with just some general technology integration advice. First of all, start small. And I think this model does a really good job with that. You're starting at the entry level, you introduce that in there. I kind of mentioned it, but something that I highly recommend, give your students an opportunity to play. You don't have to introduce all these things in here or introduce multiple tools on here. You just give your students an opportunity to work with tools and feel comfortable. I think comfort is kind of centered around these two pieces of advice here. Next is anticipate support. Yeah, I think, you're going to have those students on one end who are really going to struggle with the stuff, and students on the other end who are going to just think these tools are amazing. And it's not always going to be the same group of students there. So, leverage the resources that are out there. You can consider OPSRC a resource as well. Reach out to us. If you're like, I don't even know where to start on this tool, we could try to iron that out. We can help coach you through that way that you can coach students through as well. Be patient, not only with the students working through the process, but you're working through it as well, I imagine. Unless you've been using some of these tools for a while in the classroom setting, sometimes it's hard. Like, even if you're like aware of the tool for a long time, like, you use PowerPoint for the longest time to present stuff in school, in like an educational class or something like that. Once you start putting that into your classroom, sometimes it's hard to make that transition there. So be patient with yourself and with the students. And finally, focus on purpose. Always think about what are my students getting out of this tool being in the classroom, these resources that we're spending there. All right, let's wrap up here. I have a page dedicated to technology integration matrix goodies. Really, just go to the technology integration matrix website that's made by the Florida Center of Instructional Technology. They've really built this whole thing out. And I know it looks overwhelming, but even if you just take one single piece of this to apply in your classroom, I feel like you're going to get huge value here. So take a look at that. All of these resources are from the same website there. I just wanted to put them all in the same place. That way you don't have to go from page to page looking for them. Next, I have pages dedicated to the other models that I've already talked about: SAMR model, TPAC framework, the technology plan that's made by the U.S. Office of Technology Education. I have ISTE standards on here, and then two other models that I won't be able to talk about. Maybe I'll do something later, but we'll see. The PIC-RAC framework and the EEE framework, and I give a little description of what each one of those things are about. And then finally, we're at the end here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I really do appreciate you listening to me talk about this, especially since this was an extended tech talk on here. I could go all day, but I'm not. I'm just going to say thank you so much. Here's the link to the evaluation. I'm going to copy that and read it out just real quick. It's lowercase t period ly / lowercase g z k uppercase k on that one. So there's that. As a reminder, I'm Kashawn Hopkins. I'm joined here with Kurt Bernhardt. Together we make the technology team at Oklahoma Public School Resource Center, which you can reach out to us at techteam@opsrc.net. Got a link to the slides, but highly recommend that you check out our opsrc.net/tech talks page. We have our future tech talks coming up. Once I am done with the technology integration matrix, we're going to take a little bit of a break and then jump right into the ISTE standards. Really looking forward to unpacking this stuff. Some really great things for a lot of people there. If you want, you can suggest future technology tools. If you don't see it on this page, I would love to add more stuff in there and get more ideas. And then at the very bottom is archived tech talks. We have so much stuff there now. It's looking, I see kind of like a integration matrix here going here. I'm starting to see matrices everywhere. So check it out. And I don't think you'll be disappointed. Anyways, that's enough from me. Thank you, everybody. And I'll take any questions for anybody that's left.